Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
It has been a creepy, evident lust of this president since literally his first day in office that he wanted to see this, that he wanted to see military hardware, missile launchers, tanks, aircraft all rolled out and put on display for him. You remember he literally wanted tanks and missile launchers rolled down the streets of Washington, D.C. for his inauguration, right? You may also remember that his inauguration was a disappointment for the president in lots of ways, not least because he got an ill-attended tractor parade and, baton twirlers instead of the missile launchers and Abrams tanks that he wanted ripping up D.C.'s streets to celebrate him. Well, it took 3+ years of him in office, but he finally got his military in the streets. One of the things that has been weighing extra heavily on the sort of death of the republic scale that we all keep handy these days, is that no one will quite admit in the Trump administration and even in the military as to what it is exactly they're doing with these threats to use the U.S. military against the American people. No one will quite admit to what exactly they're participating in and who exactly is making it happen and what exactly is being unfurled here. I mean, yesterday we had the first reports that the president had ordered the deployment of the active duty U.S. Army against U.S. citizens on domestic soil. We got these first reports that he had ordered the deployment in the streets of D.C. of an active duty military police unit from Fort Bragg in North Carolina. There were then conflicting and confused reports last night as to whether the president was using the Insurrection Act of 1807 to deploy active duty troops in places other than D.C., even over the objections of the governors of those states. As of last night, officials at the Pentagon told NBC News they didn't know if the Insurrection Act thing was happening or not. We're just making it up on the fly, I guess. As the president in the Rose Garden licked his lips last night and made that herky fast inhale sound that he does and then said, "As we speak, I am dispatching thousands and thousands of heavily armed soldiers." After that pronouncement from him, not last night after he said those words, and actually not all day today, would the Pentagon actually say how many of these supposed thousands of heavily armed U.S. soldiers were actually being, in the president's words, dispatched on U.S. soil? And honestly, dispatching is not the right verb that you should apply to soldier deployments here or abroad. But whatever, that's what he said. That's what he said. But the Pentagon wouldn't elaborate, wouldn't explain, wouldn't say what was happening. And it sort of seemed like maybe they did not know. The New York Times was still reporting into the early evening tonight that it wasn't clear whether it was only going to be military police battalions deployed against the American people on the president's orders, or whether it would be other types of U.S. troops as well. It was not until tonight that the excellent defense reporter at the Associated Press, James Laporta, broke the news in the national press that, actually, it's not just military police battalions, it's combat battalions. It's the 82nd Airborne. Quote, on Tuesday, today, roughly 700 members of the Army's 82nd Airborne Division had arrived at 2 military bases near Washington, D.C. Another 1,400 soldiers are ready to be mobilized within an hour. The soldiers are armed and have riot gear as well as bayonets. Yes, bayonets. Like, think Korean War, right? A bayonet is the dagger-like thing they can mount to the end of a rifle so that they can stab people with it. The president has ordered troops with bayonets from the 82nd Airborne to deploy in the United States against the American people. For context here, here's some training footage recently posted online from the 10th Mountain Division showing their rifle bayonet assault course. This is how soldiers in the current U.S. Army are trained to use bayonets mounted on their rifles. Why did they have them deploy with bayonets? I mean, the idea of the bayonet is to get in close and stab the enemy. In case that's easier than shooting them from a foot away. That's part of how President Trump is equipping these soldiers that he's deploying against the American population right now. He's also doing this. The Associated Press, again, reporter James Laporta, also reporting tonight, quote, Dateline Washington, President Donald Trump ordered military aircraft to fly above the nation's capital last night as a show of force against American demonstrators protesting the death of George Floyd, according to 2 Department of Defense officials. Show of force missions are designed to intimidate and, in combat zones, warn opposing forces of potential military action. Here's how the New York Times reported on this as well. Quote, around 10 p.m. last night, the military stepped up its attempts to suppress the protesters. A crowd making its way through the Chinatown area of Washington had gone relatively unbothered by law enforcement, having snaked across town, blocking roads and chanting, "We can't breathe," George Floyd, and "Hands up, don't shoot." The group, for the most part, was peaceful. Then, a Black Hawk helicopter, followed by a smaller medical evacuation helicopter, a medevac helicopter, dropped to rooftop level with its searchlights aimed at the crowd. Tree limbs snapped, nearly hitting several people. Signs were torn from the sides of buildings. Some protesters looked up while others ran into doorways. The downward force of the air from the rotors was deafening. The helicopters were performing a show of force, a tactic used by military aircraft in combat zones to scatter insurgents. Again, the Associated Press reporting tonight that this specifically is what the president ordered U.S. military aircraft to do, this combat zone maneuver against Americans in the streets of an American city. The president and the defense secretary using the military this way and talking about America this way has led to criticism from some esteemed military leaders like General Tony Thomas, the former head of Special Operations Command, and General Martin Dempsey, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Admiral Mike Mullen, another former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who tonight joined that criticism and frankly raised it a level, saying, quote, I remain confident in the professionalism of our men and women in uniform. They will obey lawful orders. But I am less confident in the soundness of the orders they will be given by this commander-in-chief. We must endeavor to see American cities and towns as our homes and neighborhoods. They are not battle spaces to be dominated and must never become so. That was from Admiral Mike Mullen, who served as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff from 2007 to 2011, spanning the George W. Bush and Barack Obama presidencies. Tonight, a senior Pentagon official, James Miller, who was Undersecretary of Defense for Policy from 2012 to 2014, also resigned from the Defense Science Board at the Pentagon in protest of Defense Secretary Mark Esper accompanying President Trump on his photo op last night.
It is Wednesday, the 3rd of June of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no priest rid us of this libertine? Boy. Trump was taken to task by religious leaders, and that is just not allowed. as an ancillary, the commanding general of the D.C. National Guard has ordered an investigation and inquiry in the use of military helicopters to do that strategy of flying very low. They do this overseas in theaters of war. What's it called again? The battle space. That's it. They do this in the battle space overseas, and they fly about 40 to 30 feet above the ground, and the rotor wash pretty much destroys everything. It breaks trees apart, and that's what they did in D.C., and they do this technique to scatter the insurgents. Mm-hmm. We are the enemy. Just keep remembering that. We, the American people, are the enemy. And the commanding general of the D.C. National Guard is also looking into the use of a medical helicopter. And apparently that's not allowed. But then on the other hand, when you have cops and maybe National Guard, who else? Little green men? Yeah, we got our little green men now, but let me just finish this one thought, and we'll talk about the little green men a little bit more. But medical personnel have been attacked, shot with beanbags, beat, they don't care, clearly labeled with red crosses on their helmets. Hospital IDs, hospital workers are getting the crap beat out of them as soon as they get off their shift. You're not supposed to be on the streets. You picked the wrong time to go home. These cops are uncontrollable, and they have the audacity to say that we, the American people, are the unruly mob. The only unruly mob I see are the organized stormtroopers pretty much declaring war on the American people, along with the President of the United States. So then it beggars the question. If the President of the United States and his cops have declared war on the American people, when is it treason? Wouldn't that be treason that they have violated their oath to the Constitution to declare war on the American people? Or are we the treasonous ones because we want to preserve our representative democracy? We are the insurgents. Trump was up early, tweeting out silent majority. He has no idea, neither does Vlad have any idea who and what the silent majority is and was. But if you listen to Netroots Radio, and this show in particular, you would know, yes, the silent majority, back in the day, was that terrible sleeping giant that was awakened. The great middle of America. Everyday Americans finally woke up, saw that their sons and many of their daughters, too, were dying in an illegal war. Not even a declared war. It was a police action so they could get around the Congressional War Powers Act, which we don't have anymore. The president can just do anything he wants now. In fact, he can even declare war on the American people. And the GOP, Vichy collaborating government, says, yeah, that's okay. So medical personnel are having the crap beat out of them during a pandemic, by the way. During a pandemic. Because the cops don't care. Everybody is a potential enemy. They are not here to protect and serve us. No. They are here to serve and protect a different class than us. Protect and serve, actually, if you open it up, you find out is a cookbook from an alien planet. They even had it on the Twilight Zone back in the day. No one knew. No one knew. So, Little Green Men. Lincoln Memorial yesterday, the great monument of where every protest goes. I mean, even King had his I Have a Dream speech. Well, it looks like Trump has his I Have a Dream finally fulfilled. His little green men. Did they come from the Crimea? I don't know. They might have been there under contract because they're Erik Prince's Blackwater Praetorian Goon Guards. Yep, expect intersections in America shot up and scores of American citizens killed in intersections because Erik Prince's Praetorian Goon Guard does that kind of stuff, like in Fallujah. Yeah, and after about a decade back and forth legally, it was finally determined, well, those Blackwater guards, they had a point. Okay, so I see where this is going. CIA analysts have analyzed the situation in the United States, juxtaposed it against other similar behaviors and actions in other countries. And, the behaviors and actions that Trump and our government is taking are the last throes of a failed government. Well, yeah, that's right. It is going to collapse. This Trump government is going to collapse, and his behaviors are the behaviors of a collapsing government. Because he knows in November, his fascist government will completely collapse right after the election. Of course, then we have to wait till January. What the hell is going to happen in that interim? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Bill Barr will present a little-known OLC memo that a president who has been elected out of office or has been kicked out of office in an election cannot be removed from office during a pandemic and an insurrection by the American people. That's right. Now I'm hearing Bill Barr was the one who ordered the tear gassing of the peaceful protesters right outside St. John's Church, including like one of the pastors, not priest and Episcopalian, is it? I'm a Catholic, so I supposedly know this triumvirate of the Episcopalian, Catholic, and Lutheran. They're supposed to be the three that are like pretty close together. Anyway, members of that particular parish at St. John's were tear gassed too. And then Trump decided to go to John Paul II's memorial there. They call him St. John Paul II now. Just a little side note, for John Paul II to become a saint, you have to be able to perform a miracle. And it was determined in the Vatican that the mere suggestion that John Paul II should be a saint is a miracle. And so that's how he became a saint. Just the suggestion that he could even be a saint. That wasn't a miraculous proposal. And so he became a saint. So Trump went over there, and I don't even think he's Catholic. I don't know. I was under the impression that, when I was a little kid, as a Catholic, you couldn't go into a church, a Protestant church, a synagogue, a mosque. Yeah, that was excommunicable for you. And if you took communion in a Protestant church, yeah, you were out on your ear. I don't think there is really restrictions for non-Catholics coming into a cathedral. Maybe not. But it was rather jarring, even though I'm no big fan of John Paul II. It was rather jarring to see Trump and Melania right up there by the vestments. What was he going to do? Grab it right by the chalice? And they'll let him do it because he's a star bigger than God in his own brain? And then Kellyanne Conway attacked, and we'll get on with a story about that because we have that here in the top in the Bistro Cafe. Attacked religious leaders for criticizing Trump's use of military and tear gas and rubber bullets and beanbags to clear a peaceful protests of religious people so he could take over their church. Oh, by the way, did you know that the Archbishop of the Episcopalian St. John's Church, and also I believe is it an archbishop? A bishop nonetheless, who is responsible for St. John Paul II, and it's so hard to say St. John Paul. Pope John Paul's little memorial there, are both black. Is it a coincidence? Yes, this is a rhetorical question. Is it a coincidence that both of those leaders of those religious places are black, so he can walk right all over them? Come on. So Kellyanne Conway says you can't question his faith. The only faith that Donald Trump practices is a faith in his own so-called superior genes. And we know how really superior they are. That's the only faith he has. Thank you, Kellyanne Conway. Of course, we cannot question that. Well, speaking of which, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, that heavy criticism continues over Trump's hazy idea to use the military on U.S. soil. Yeah, but he doesn't care. He doesn't know anything about America or the Constitution. So, he can just make up his own rules. No, he can't. On the rest of the menu, a Virginia GOP gubernatorial candidate told gun owners they should be ready to shoot anti-fascist protesters. Yeah, even in this little town. Oh, Josh, we're just burning through the time here, but it's okay. We're a salon. I was suspended from the local Rogue River Facebook community page yesterday. While I was preparing for yesterday's show, I inadvertently opened up the page, and it was full of a bunch of racist bile. And I should remind folks that on this particular page, you're not supposed to be posting politics. But the right-wing, deplorable, racist bigots here in town do it all the time. And as soon as anybody criticizes it, that person gets muted or suspended, and so I was. But I figured since that was going to happen, I might as well put something up that's not really quite comprehensive. It was hard. I posted just only about 70 instances of race riots since Reconstruction. And because there's thousands, actually. And because of that misdeed, I was suspended for 24 hours. My snoozing sous chef is snoozing really loud. I'm sorry. Anyway, so before it had been taken down, now I got to tell you, my whole post of those 70 some odd instances of race riots in the United States since Reconstruction up to about, well, now, to juxtapose the QAnon bigoted racist bullshit, and that's what I'm going to say in the morning, because that's what it was, that was on that page. Now, granted, the administrator for the page turned off the comments, but he left those posts up and took down the history of race riots in the United States down. And then took me off the page. Not being able to comment, post for 24 hours. Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot. Now, in that, and I got to say, I reported it. The comment that this town should be looking for any Antifa and anybody who supports them, meaning anti-fascists like me, should be shot. Now, I can't really just report that to the cops around here because they're oath keepers. Who do I go to? So I did report it to Facebook, but I will say that when I've reported vile, homophobic invectives, when I've reported harassment with the most vile pejoratives that you can come up with that start with F and end with K, that will never get a deplorable suspended or that post taken down. I have not been able to get one thing taken down that a deplorable is put up. So even a direct threat of violence, you would think that would take that post down and get that person suspended. And I know it's a slow period for them. And they can say they haven't gotten to it yet. But that person who threatened to kill Antifa in town, or anybody who might be advocating them, like me, that post is still up. That comment continues. That's the normal. And I was told, now you know why no one likes you. Like we're in high school. Why the hell would I want a racist to like me? And why the hell would I want a bunch of racists in town to like me? I could care less. I want to make their lives so miserable, they move back to, California. Jeez, they moved up here for white utopia. They couldn't stand graffiti. Yeah, right, you couldn't stand graffiti. I better get back into this curated part of the show. Okay, well, the White House operatives have begun viciously attacking religious leaders who criticize Trump's tear gas lighting photo op. Yeah, the White House actually put out a directive to media that they have to take down their reporting that there was tear gas and other military action taken to clear the square, Lafayette Park, and open up an avenue for Trump to walk to St. John's. They're saying it never happened. And yet, it was on live TV around the world. That's what I call tear gas lighting. And Minneapolis police face a civil rights probe over George Floyd's death and decades of systemic racism. Also, those 6 cops that pulled those college students from Spelman out of their car as they were trying to get back to their dorms 5 minutes after the curfew started, in which it was imposed 10 minutes before it started. Yeah, they've been fired and they are under investigation as well. Thank God. Or, I don't know, thank representative democracy. God had nothing to do with it. After the break, we move to the chef's table where the European Union warned Trump he cannot unilaterally change the rules to allow Russia back in the G7. Merkel's not coming, so Trump figured he's going to fill it with somebody else, like maybe Vlad. He's already got Putin and Morrison from Australia and Modi from India saying, we'll come. If those other countries aren't going to come, you need to have at least 7, right? And the World Health Organization's regional director for the Americas urged the U.S. to keep helping countries fight the novel coronavirus even as the Trump administration leaves the UN agency. Lancet just came out with a big story that a small U.S. business who will not give their data and how they came to their data, countries and the U.S. cited its study to essentially stop funding the World Health Organization. And it turns out this small American company is staffed by a science fiction writer and an adult content provider. And they won't give us the basis of their data and how they came to their conclusions. Isn't that odd? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. Do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. I just paid the ISP bill today. Oh my gosh. And it has gone up too. So thank you for your generosity in helping us pay our bills. We would not be able to do this without you. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that posted up on social media, because that's what you're supposed to do. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. My snoozing sous chef is snoozing. I love him so much. I can't kick him out of the room, so I apologize for the snooze. Also, we have really burned through a lot of time today because there's so much to speak about. But let's get into this curated aspect of the show here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Josh Israel of the American Independent brings us this first offering. A Virginia lawmaker and gubernatorial candidate urged gun owners to be on notice that they need to shoot anti-fascist protesters. Really now? In a Facebook Live video flagged by Right Wing Watch, Republican State Senator Amanda Chase told gun owners who are proficient in using to be on notice and to be careful, not fearful. Oh, yeah? The only reason these people have guns is because they're fearful? Please. If Antifa tries to hijack any of these rallies that are going to be going on in Chesterfield area, they're going to be in for a real surprise because there were a number of people from the Second Amendment community. Remember when Trump invoked that? He asked his brown shirt deplorables to go and shoot American citizens who they deem to be anti-fascists. Who does that? Yes, fascists do. Protests have swept the nation, as if you didn't know, after the death of George Floyd, an unarmed black man who died after a white police officer in Minneapolis knelt on his neck. The latest in the uncountable number of black Americans killed in encounters with white police officers, I should say. It wasn't just the one white officer on his neck. The other two officers, because there was 3 on Floyd and 1 standing guard. The other 2 officers contributed to his death also, in which the official coroner's report from the community said, he died from hypertension. And the independent, Dr. Bodden, we all know him, conducted the autopsy, and the 3 people on him cut off his air supply. They compressed his chest, they compressed his waist, and they choked him off at the neck for 10 minutes until he was dead. So those other 2 should be charged with accomplices to murder as well, if not murder outright. Indeed. Chase did not immediately respond to an inquiry about her comments because she doesn't know that it's wrong. Trump said that he wanted his Second Amendment people to show up and kill anti-fascists. Once again, who calls for the killing of anti-fascists? You would think that would be the fascists, wouldn't you? In April, she claimed Governor Ralph Northam's coronavirus social distancing rules were really designed to keep Second Amendment conservatives and other conservatives from storming the state capitol in protest against Virginia's egregious new progressive laws. Armed gun nuts, armed militias took over state houses across America during a pandemic, ran electeds out of town, and Bill Barr didn't find any of that untoward to send in the military? Desai Martin of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Donald Trump's allies are viciously attacking religious leaders who criticized him this week for allowing federal law enforcement officers to shoot tear gas and rubber bullets at peaceful protesters outside the White House on Monday evening. The police fired on the protesters as well as multiple members of the press who were there to document the demonstration in order to clear a path for Trump, who was walking to a nearby church to take photos. After the protesters were forcibly moved, Trump walked to St. John's Episcopal Church, located across the street from the White House, and held a brief 3-minute photo op while holding up a Bible he never read. Bishop Marianne Egder Booty, who oversees the church, was outraged that Trump would condone violent force against protesters, saying, "What we are witnessing now is a shredding of our national fabric." But Buddy later said she was outraged by Trump's photo op. The president just used a Bible, the most sacred text of the Judeo-Christian tradition, and one of the churches of my diocese without permission as a backdrop for a message antithetical to the teachings of Jesus, she added. Jenna Ellis, a senior legal advisor for the Trump campaign, shot back, claiming that Buddy was a pawn of the leftist media. If you've called for your deplorables to shoot anti-fascists, and then you have somebody in your government saying that you're a pawn of the leftist media, I think that would make them fascists. Yeah, I'm using the F word. And I have been for a while. I didn't just start this. We all knew it in the beginning. On Wednesday, White House counselor Kellyanne Conway also attacked Buddy and other religious leaders who had criticized Trump because you can't do that. He's a star bigger than God. Several clergy members said this week that they too had been among those tear-gassed and shot at with rubber bullets at Monday night's protest. But that's not enough because they're just all pawns of the leftist media and they need to be put in their place. They need to be corrected. Another Episcopal leader added separately that they are among a group of clergy members handing out snacks and water to protesters that night when the National Guard arrived and began attacking them. Well, the National Guard said it's because they were aiding and abetting the enemy. That's right. We, the American people, are now the enemy of the state. Karnowski and Amy Forliti of the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. The state of Minnesota on Tuesday yesterday launched a civil rights investigation of the Minneapolis Police Department in hopes of forcing widespread changes following the death of George Floyd, a black man who died after white officers pressed his knee into Floyd's neck and body for almost 10 minutes, even after he stopped moving. Governor Tim Walz and the Minnesota Department of Human Rights announced the filing of the formal complaint at a news conference yesterday afternoon, Tuesday. The governor and Human Rights Commissioner Rebecca Lucero said they hope to reach agreement with the city to identify short-term ways to address the police department's history of racial discrimination and use the investigation to find long-term solutions for systemic change. Well, maybe I can jump in here in just one moment, but let's just finish this part. Lucero said their goal is to negotiate a consent decree with the city that courts could enforce with injunctions and financial penalties. There are precedents, she said, including a consent decree approved in Chicago last year after the U.S. Justice Department found a long history of racial bias and excessive use of force by police. Well, I'm pretty sure Trump will stop those investigations, and Bill Barr will say that you can't do that. I have an OLC memo that says you can't take cops to task. But let me give a suggestion about these consent decrees. You want a short-term fix? Fire every goddamn cop there is, put them through a vetting process, and hire back the good ones, if there are any. Because as far as I'm concerned, the equation is this. 3 bad cops plus 7 good cops who don't say or do a thing equals 10 bad cops. Fire their asses, all of them. Put them back through training if they're supposedly good cops. Make sure the bad cops never work as cops ever again. And that means going to the police academies and accrediting them in some other fashion than the way they are accredited now. No more teaching that the American public is the enemy and everybody and everything should be suspect. I know cops live in a dangerous business, but you know who dies more than cops? Roofers. People putting roofs on houses. So please, fire all of them, vet them again, reconstruct the police academies, demilitarize them, and maybe we might have community policing instead of these armed paramilitaries acting like vigilante brown shirts. Let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. We promise. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Chain will keep us together. After the crash of 2008, a pseudonymous computer math person published a solution to a believed to be unsolvable problem. How do you maintain the integrity of transactions in a decentralized commercial system? How do you know who has spent what without some central thing keeping track like, say, a bank? His or her solution was a transaction registration protocol wherein a transaction records its own occurrence while also containing the history of its preceding transactions. Each of these blocks of data would be verified by preceding blocks in the chain. Therefore, in order to mess with this transaction data, you'd have to target every single block in the chain, a task so impractical as to be virtually impossible. So, with this blockchain protocol or process, you could keep track of what you spent in a verified way with no central organization. This development allowed people to make their own virtual currencies or cryptocurrencies, like Bitcoin. You learn all of this information in the first few minutes of Alex Winter's latest documentary, Trust Machine, The Story of Blockchain. It's worth a watch, but keep your attention cap on because once it starts, it's off faster than I speak. Yeah, I hear your complaints. Trust Machine moves via a series of interviews backboned by quiet narration by Rosario Dawson. It's snazzy without being slick, and if it has a weakness, it's not in its filmmaking, but in the limitations of its subject matter. Blockchain, Bitcoin, and other cryptocurrencies are so new, we've yet to see their full effect. So all Winter can say is they could revolutionize individual commerce, could revolutionize national finance, could revolutionize how artists get funded. Meanwhile, a whole lot of middlemen look to be cut out of the financial processes that they've been leeching off of for generations. What I really want to see is Trust Machine 2, the blockchain documentary that Alex Winter makes 15 years from now. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman. Deep in the inky depths of what's called the ocean's mesopelagic zone, more than 500 meters beneath the surface, the main source of light is not the sun, even during the day. Most of the light comes instead from bioluminescent organisms, creatures that produce their own light. It's in these dark depths that southern elephant seals love to feast on squids and fish.
So initially we wanted to know how elephant seals find their prey in the dark.
Pauline Goulet from the University of St. Andrews Sea Mammal Research Unit. Thanks to data logging technology, researchers have a fairly good handle on how far elephant seals travel to feed and how long and how deep they dive. But nobody really knew how they find their prey in the darkness. Do they track the lights, or is something else going on?
So we built a sensor that could pick up flashes produced by animals that were being hunted by the elephant seals, because we thought that elephant seals might be looking for that light to catch a snack.
But it turned out that the fish actually used their bioluminescence to disorient seals after the seals began their attack.
The thing is, it seemed that the flashing prey were harder to catch than the non-flashing prey, which we found out by looking at the duration of the chase, which was longer for flashing prey.
The fish flash was always emitted just after the seal launched an attack, making it a defensive, reactive maneuver to distract the seals. But at least one seal learned to turn that liability into a hunting strategy.
This seal, which appeared to be a master in catching this flashing prey, because each time you tried to catch a prey, first it would do this little head movement that was probably mechanically sensed by the prey. Then it would induce the prey to flash because the prey reacts to this approaching predator.
The seal would twitch her head, see where the light came from, and only then start the chase. So even if some seals can use bioluminescence as a way to find food, for most, the light is a distraction. Goulet thinks that seals probably rely more on their whiskers to sense the movements their prey make in the water.
Yeah, it's just a step forward into understanding what's happening in this depth, in this ecosystem that we don't really know much about, especially in the Southern Ocean.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Amazingly, America has become a nation of socialists, asking in dismay, where's the government? These are not born-again Bernie Sanders activists, but everyday people of all political stripes, including previously apolitical multitudes who are now clamoring for big government intervention in their lives. Nothing like a spreading coronavirus pandemic to bring home the need that all of us have, both as individuals and as a society, for an adequately funded, fully functioning, competent government capable of serving all. Instead, in our moment of critical national need, Trump's government has been a rickety medicine show run by a small-minded flimflammer peddling laissez-fairyland snake oil. We have it totally under control, Trump pompously declared after the first U.S. case was confirmed in January. For weeks, as the pandemic spread out of control, he did nothing. An increasingly anxious public found that they couldn't even get reliable test kits from Trump's hollowed-out government health agencies. Still, he shrugged off all concern and responsibility. By April, in theory, he said, when it gets a little warmer, it miraculously goes away. Not exactly a can-do Rooseveltian response to a national crisis. That complete absence of White House leadership is why a deadly pathogen is now raging practically everywhere across our land. Unknown millions of us are being infected. A closed indefinitely sign has literally been hung on the American economy, and even our people's social and civic interactions, the essence of community life, have been halted. This is Jim Hightower saying, right-wing politico Grover Norquist once said he wanted a government so small I can drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub. Trump has shown us what such a small-minded government looks like and what it costs us.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1900. That was the day that the International Lady Garment Workers Union was formed in New York City by 7 local unions. While men held nearly all of the leadership roles in the early days of the union, most of the workers were Jewish women. One woman who rose through the ranks of the union's leadership was Fanya Kohn. She was a Russian Jewish immigrant who worked as a sleeve maker. She helped to organize an ILGWU local at her workplace in New York. By 1916, she was elected as a vice president for the union. She was the first woman to hold that position. She made labor education programs her top priority, helping to found a workers' university at Washington Irving High School. Distinguished professors visited and gave lectures. In 1920, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics called the school, quote, the first systematic scheme of education undertaken by organized labor in the United States. Fania expanded her educational efforts on the East Coast from Boston to Philadelphia, and to the West as far as Cleveland and Chicago. In 1919, 800 members had taken part in one of the courses. Classes included subjects such as public speaking, health, and literacy. Fania helped to found the Brookwood Labor College in New York, the first residential workers' college in the United States. Fania often met with obstacles within her union. She believed workers deserved a broad education that included stimulating culture and intellectual content. Many of the male leaders in the union wanted more narrow education focused on union matters. Despite this opposition, the ILGWU became an important force for social justice unionism within the United States labor movement. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the mid-80s. Mainly sunny to start, then a few afternoon clouds. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Overnight lows in the mid-50s with winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Generally clear overnight. Tomorrow we're going to have a high in the low to mid-80s, except for a few afternoon clouds, mainly sunny. And winds will be out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County of Southern Oregon stand at 67 today, still up from what it was last week. No deaths reported. The grass pollen is rated very high right outside the window of the mothership. The air quality index in the whole region is good at 29 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is very high. It's gone up to 9, so take care, all right? 30 plus SPV or more, or better. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.11 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 62%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. I'll just add that there is coronavirus in every single city that we are reporting the weather on today. So that stated, London is 64 with a rain shower. Paris is 79 degrees and sunny. Rome is 79 and sunny. Kyiv is 58 degrees with a light rain shower. Kabul is 74 and fair. Tokyo is 81 and partly cloudy. I'm sorry, Hong Kong is 81 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 72 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 58 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 65 degrees and sunny, and New York, New York is 76 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour, pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Andrea Shalal of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The EU rejected any suggestion that the group of 7 advanced economies could be expanded to include Russia and warned Washington that it could not change the rules for the group on its own. Yeah, well, Donald Trump doesn't follow any rules. He makes them up. Trump said that he dismissed the G7 as a very outdated group of countries and said he would invite the leaders of Australia, Russia, South Korea, and India to join a leaders summit now postponed to September. The EU said it viewed the G7 as a vital multilateral framework that cannot be changed on a permanent basis by the chair of the group, currently the U.S. Russia's participation in the G8 has been suspended until Russia changes course and the environment allows for the G8 to again have a meaningful discussion. This is currently not the case. Russia was expelled from what was then the Group of 8 in 2014 when Trump's predecessor, the black guy Barack Obama, was U.S. president after Moscow annexed the Crimea region from Ukraine. Russia still holds the territory, and various G7 governments have rebuffed previous calls from Trump to readmit Moscow.
Je te donne seulement l'amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The WHO's regional director for the Americas urged the U.S. to keep helping countries in the region to fight the novel coronavirus, even as Trump leaves the UN agency. Coronavirus has infected almost 3 million people in the region that has massive inequalities, vulnerable indigenous groups in the Amazon, and megacities where people live in close quarters and share public transportation, said the director, Carissa Etienne. She said in a virtual briefing that the United States provides 60% of the WHO's regional branch, the Washington-based Pan American Health Organization, which she heads. Trump said on Friday that he was cutting ties with the WHO, accusing it of becoming a puppet of China. I'll tell you who the puppet is. The WHO has denied Trump's assertion that it promoted Chinese disinformation about the virus. The Geneva-based WHO was founded in 1948, part of the Marshall Plan. And Etienne said U.S. ties with PAHO go back further to its founding in Washington in 1902. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we'll meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum.